Welcome to a TICE Talk Special. Coming up on today's show, big news for Reform UK. We've got a new leader and we've unveiled a big, bold economic vision. I talk to the economists who helped produce the plan to explain its importance. Welcome to TICE Talk. Hello and welcome. So big news since my last show. I'm really honoured to become leader of Reform UK and take it forward into the future with big, bold reform plans. And this is a vital moment in our nation's future. The Chancellor in last week's budget has basically confirmed the Tories have abandoned all hope or pretence of being the party of low tax and high growth. And instead, they are now officially the party of high tax, high regulation and low growth. They plan the greatest total tax take since the war, the lowest growth in 60 years, and they plan to increase taxes on the lowest paid. Well, with me to discuss this alternative and our alternative economic vision is my friend Dr. David Bull. Welcome, David.
Hello. Hello, Richard. And can I just start by saying congratulations?
Oh, you're very kind.
Well, it's wonderful. New leader, new vision, new hope. You know, I think it's a very exciting moment.
Well, that's very kind of you. And it is an exciting time. We have just launched our big, new, bold economic plan. You know, it's the first of three pillars of reform that we plan. We've got to reform the way our economy is managed and taxed. We've got to reform our public services so they work more efficiently, faster for us, the customers, and then we've got to reform the institutions. But today we're talking about our economic plan, this big economic vision, a totally, completely alternative approach where actually we promote low tax leading to high growth. Does that sound good?
It sounds incredibly good. I think most people are very disappointed with the current government. You know, they came to power with a premise of saying they would be a low-tax party. And what have we seen? We've essentially seen the rises in the stealth taxes. We've seen little companies being taxed excessively, and that has stifled growth. And I think, actually, successive governments have really tinkered around the edges. They've just sort of played with the tax system. And no one has been brave enough to say, hang on a minute, it doesn't really work very well, does it? And so what I think this is a very pivotal moment, because essentially what we're saying is, why don't we do things differently? And that's the plan that you've set out. I think it's very exciting, and I'll tell you why. You know, if you earn under £20,000, you can tell I'm excited. If you earn under £20,000, you won't pay any tax at all. That's really, really important. Absolutely. That higher rate comes in when you earn over £70,000, and for small companies, which, by the way, make up the backbone of this country, they are not going to pay corporation tax until they earn over £100,000. That's really important. They can invest in their companies, employ people, and get the unemployment numbers down. Win, win, win.
Absolutely. Well, it's great that you're excited. And with me today to talk us through this in more detail, I'm delighted that we've got the economist and director of Walbrook Economics, Ewan Stewart, who did all the heavy lifting in producing this plan with a little bit of help from myself. Ewan, hi there. How are you? Nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Richard. Hi, how are you doing? And congratulations on the launch of your leadership today. Well done
very
indeed.
much. Well, and thank you for all your hard work on this economic plan. We've had some great feedback from the launch, and I thought it'd be really useful just to, in a sense, chew over with you some of the details of the plan, and for you to help our viewers sort of understand how it came about, and then some of the key elements of it, and some genuine sort of questions that people might want to ask. But firstly, in terms of how have we got to this situation, Ewan, where the two main parties of the UK have basically morphed into one economic philosophy of high tax, high regulation, meaning low growth? How's this happened?
It's been happening over a very long period of time. I mean, Britain today has got the highest taxes since the 1960s. And it used to be considered that Britain was a fairly low-tax economy. That's been the perception. But we can no longer argue that perception. We produced this paper showing how tax has been rising steadily year in, year out. And all the data is based on the Office of National Statistics. And also it's been backed up by the Taxpayers Alliance, who have pointed out there's been 400 individual tax hikes over the last decade, and that's under a Conservative government. Frankly, there's not a cigarette paper that can be put between the Conservative and Labour plans. And actually, their policies aren't working. Decade after decade, growth in this country has been falling. It peaked in the 1960s, it got a bit worse in the 70s, it recovered a bit in the 80s, and has gone downhill rapidly since then. And Britain really needs to raise its sights. We live in a technological age. There's absolutely no reason at all that growth cannot go back to the 1960s levels. We're underperforming very materially what other developed countries are doing. Yes, we've done a bit better than Europe, but that's a fairly low bar compared with America, with Switzerland, with Canada and Australia in particular. We've underperformed very materially. And I think there's a reason for that. Government effectively has micromanaged, it's commanded and controlled, it's increased taxes, it's increased regulation, and it's slowly begun to strangle the economy. Now, I know that the lockdown has exacerbated that trend, and I know the lockdown, thankfully, is coming to an end. Too slowly, but it is slowly coming to an end. But today, the state is 56% of the economy. So over half of all the output of this country is dominated by the state. And I think what we've tried to do in this plan is to get back to what actually creates a successful economy. Is it government spending and directing, or actually is a better way to grow business, grow employment, grow jobs, encourage the wealth creating sector, which ultimately pays for the NHS and the education and the public sector and it provides a sustainability to that basis. So we're doing the opposite of what Labour and Conservative have done. The Conservative Party, just in the budget, Rishi Sunak just a few days ago, raised taxes further. Just a little bit, I accept that, but certainly in corporation tax, a very substantial rise. But the aggregate effect is this is a highly taxed nation. And the paradox of that is, though, that people aren't happy with the public services either. So what we are trying to do is recreate the dynamo that this country has. And I think that we can do that through the disaster that's been COVID with a fairly modest investment, £48 billion investment. That sounds a lot. It's 2% of GDP. It's actually only 12 weeks spending on what's been spent on COVID and the lockdown. And this, instead of shrinking the cake, will grow the cake.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. I've always said that the individual or the small business owner will always spend £1 in their pocket much better, much more wisely, and get more value than the government spending £1 of our money from their pocket.
Well, it's not their pocket, is it?
It's not their pocket,
That's
no.
Yeah. That's absolutely correct. It's obvious that you know what's better to spend than a centralised, straight-driven approach. There's a whole body of academic evidence which is shown from Reaganomics to the Thatcher period, but lots of other examples where the individual knows best. And in actual fact, through that entrepreneurship, spending money, whether it be on restaurants or on however you want to spend it as an individual, grows employment. And growing employment grows the tax bases, grows wages, and we're creating a virtuous circle, not the vicious circle that's been increasingly created by Conservative and Labour over the last 20 years.
So, Ewan, can you talk us through, firstly, how does the changes that we propose to income tax, how that helps, how that puts money into the pockets of everybody, but in particular the lowest paid and the least well off, what those changes are on income tax? Well,
yeah. Our guiding principle was simplify. I've got an accountant, you probably have an accountant, but I'd like to put the guy out of business. And I mean that in the nicest possible way. Let's focus on what's productive. So what has happened over the last few years is an enormous complication in tax at every level. But if you just take income tax, it used to be a really quite simple basis that there was a tax-free element, then there was the basic rate and the higher rate. Now there's the tax-free element, the basic rate, a higher rate still. And actually, at a certain band, you lose all the initial tax-free rates. So there's been a tremendous complication. But what we've tried to do is focus on a policy that everybody is better off, but we're mindful that those that are on modest incomes and working hard should benefit proportionately the most. So when income tax was first introduced to fund the Napoleonic Wars, all that time ago, only a tiny proportion of the population paid the tax, the wealthiest 5 or 6% of the population. We can't go that far, but we can start to move in a much better direction. So we propose that over 6 million people who earn between £15,000 and £20,000 are taken out the tax code completely. So they will pay no income tax at all. So between 20,000 and 70,000, you'll pay a flat rate of 20%. And then above that, you'll pay a top rate of 40%. So someone earning £20,000 a year will be £1,500 better off. And that will cascade all the way up, and there'll be slightly larger benefits for people earning between 50 and 70,000. But £1,500 a year on 20,000 is a big pay rise.
Can I just jump in very quickly? There's been a lot in the press about the nurses and the government's derisory offer of 1%. Now, under this regime, my understanding is nurses would get something like a 6% net increase in their pay. That's extraordinary.
Their take-home pay.
Their take-home pay,
Yeah, not just nurses, but absolutely. I mean, people typically earning 20 to 30,000, which would be nurses, they might be teachers, policemen, they will get a very substantial pay rise. The other side of the simplification is that we're going to fund this from ending pension tax credits. And so that is a simplification. We'll be producing a future paper on savings, which and pensions are very important paper to the benefit of the country. But what we are really doing is we're simplifying the tax code and recycling the money so people can spend it how they see fit, but biasing it heavily towards the moderately well-off. We've got, in economic terms, a higher propensity to spend, frankly.
Unlike the Chancellor, who unbelievably wants to basically bring in another 1.3 million people of the least well-off, the lowest paid, into paying income tax. I mean, I just think it's morally reprehensible.
Well, it is really. And can I just ask, I mean, theoretically, could you ever be in a position where you have a high tax economy and have high growth? Is that ever possible?
I don't think so. Not in the long term.
Which is where they're going, essentially, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at Britain's performance relative to Australia, Canada, and America, it's quite interesting. Australia's got somewhat lower taxes than the UK. America clearly has lower taxes, but Canada's the interesting one. And it's extraordinary that Britain has underperformed Canada, actually. But Canada was always considered a high tax economy. And if you look what's happened over the last 10 or 15 years, Canada actually has been gradually reducing its tax rate, and it's that rate of reduction that has fueled the private sector. We've lost our way in this country. The mainstream media in particular concentrates on what the politician is doing for X, Y, and Z little interest group. And I get that. You know, there's clearly a strong place for responsible public spending, but the balance is totally wrong. 56% of the economy isn't compatible with a free society, to be honest, in terms of state expenditure. And we've got to get back to a much more balanced economy between a dynamic private sector, a sector where actually the medium and lowly paid and the better off can all make their own choices in society. And that will feed into a virtuous circle.
And Ewan, so that brings us on to talk about corporation tax, because the plan is proposing a big change to corporation tax. Just talk us through that and how that helps the self-employed and the small businesses in particular.
Yeah, well, I think our plan is simplification. So our basic tax rates are going to be 0 and 20 across a whole range of different taxes. So we propose setting corporation tax at 20%, somewhat less than Rishi Sunak announced the other day. But what is critical is we're going to take about 80% of all businesses out of paying corporation tax. So any company making less than £100,000 a year of profit will pay 0 corporation tax.
That's really serious.
Now,
It is. Sorry. I was just going to say that for me, when the press talk about corporations, they always see these really big companies, and that's not the truth, is it? There are many small companies that make up these corporations, and they are really struggling. They've really struggled in this COVID crisis, and in fact, they need help.
And of course, actually, it's the self-employed, isn't it, Ewan, that the Chancellor just completely excluded from all the support schemes throughout the pandemic.
Yeah. Well, the truth of the matter is employment growth in this country comes from small and middle-sized businesses, companies employing less than 200 people. The very large companies, of course, they're hugely important, but they generally don't grow at anything like the dynamic rate of smaller companies. And these are the very companies that have been hit so terribly, by and large, by lockdown. So by taking a lot of small and micro businesses out of corporation tax, hopefully that will allow them to be more dynamic and take on perhaps an extra employee, give them a little bit more confidence. And in actual fact, this is not a very expensive measure, actually. The headline, it costs about $6 billion, but actually the Chancellor will get most of that back in income tax and dividend tax. So we reckon actually the net cost is about only $1.5 billion. But the real benefit is in the employment growth and the simplification.
And our plans, Ewan, you're forecasting that will lead to growth in the economy every year of about 1.25% sort of every year, which obviously then increases tax revenues. Just how does that work? How does this, what they call the multiplier effect, you've just talked about money moving around the economy, how does that work?
Well, I mean, you alluded, the most disappointing aspect, to my mind, of Rishi Sunak's budget was the very low long-term growth assumptions of 1.6, 1.7%. And, if you just take a step back, we live in an extraordinary age of technological development and opportunity. And why should it be that growth has been falling year in, year out? And particularly, we've performed so poorly against Australia, Canada, Switzerland, and America. And I think it is very simply that government has increased its tentacles into almost every area of our life. Yeah. And that increased regulation has been a significant drag on growth. And we now have reached a tipping point where the tax take is at its highest level since the 1970s. And to be honest, you don't need a degree in economics to work out what effect that has on spending patterns. Yeah. And if you don't, if you reduce your spending because the government is taking a higher proportion of it, inevitably that results in less employment and lower growth. Yeah. Well, Britain, given its strategic advantages, it's got the world's largest financial sector along with New York. It's got the world's global capital. It's got two of the world's finest universities and 30 or 40 other front-ranked universities.
We should be doing so much better.
It's got wonderful cultural assets. Yeah. Frankly, you've got to ask, why are we doing so badly? And I am absolutely confident it's down to the mismanagement of our government system. Well,
in terms of questions, Ewan, we've got a couple of questions from our supporters that I hope you'll be able to take. We've got a question from Sandra Skinner, who's hopefully here with us. Sandra, hi there, welcome. How are you? All right?
Hi, Richard.
Hi, Sandra. Great. So we've got Ewan with us. So please fire away and see if you can challenge Ewan with a question or something, Sandra.
Hi, Sandra.
Hi, Ewan. I'm actually very excited to hear about your proposals on inheritance tax. However, could you explain a little more in how your ideas compare to the current system and what difference that will actually make to those who are exposed to inheritance tax?
Okay, we are proposing that all inheritance tax will be abolished unless the estate is valued at over £2 million. And for the very small number of estates, which is about 2%, less than 2% of in fact, only about 2,000 estates a year that are worth over that, the estate has the chance of giving the money to a registered charity of their choice or HMRC. I think I can probably guess which they'll choose. But the truth of the matter is that very, very rich don't pay much inheritance tax. They've set the money up in trust funds, etc., etc. This is a tax on good, honest, affluent, hard-working people who, at the end of their lives, find there's a double taxation. They've been paying tax all these years, and the government takes a further 40%. So we're effectively abolishing inheritance tax for virtually the entire population. Now, the cost of inheritance tax, it's a small tax. The government raises over 700 billion in tax a year. Inheritance tax is 5 or 6 billion. So it sounds unaffordable, but it's not unaffordable in the context of our policies. And we think that, at the moment, the threshold is £325,000, which, is quite a lot of money. But there's an awful lot of estates end up paying, substantial amounts for no good purpose. So this is a simplification, and it's something at a difficult time in people's lives that they don't need to worry about.
Yeah. Does that help, Sandra?
Yeah, it does. Thank you very much.
I mean, well,
not at all. Thanks for the question.
So I've certainly noticed that not only is it, as you say, a double taxation, but also it's at a very emotional, difficult time, and there's a whole army of accountants out there trying to find ways to get around it, to avoid it, and it's so unproductive. And it's an expensive tax to collect. And frankly, I want those accountants. I want them out designing things, making things, creating things.
I agree, and I just think it's just so wrong. That the fact is, as you just said, that people work hard all their lives, and the one asset they have, the house, is then taxed again. That's just wrong. And what message does that send about aspiration? None.
None at all. Well, look, thank you, Sandra, and also thank you to Sandra's cat who made a brief guest appearance.
Very good appearance, I thought.
We've now got another question actually from Ian Price, who's also got a question for Ewan. Hi there, Ian. How are you doing?
Hi, Richard. Yes, all good. Thank you. You?
Excellent. Fine. Thanks. Fine. Thanks for sharing your interest. And I know you've got a question for Ewan. So far away. Let's see if we can challenge Ewan again.
Yeah. The economic policies you've introduced sound great, but I'm curious as to your thoughts on why other parties haven't done this already.
Ian, it's a great question. I sometimes think support of a traditional political party is a bit like supporting a football team. Come on the Blues, come on the Reds. But, when I was a good deal younger than I am now, the Conservative Party would have adopted policies like this. And in fact, it probably would have been seen as a bit wet, what we're proposing in a strange way. 48 billion, what's that? Not very much. You can do much better. This is the start of a journey. We have seen incremental tax rises. It started with Blair and Brown. And they did it modestly initially, and then they increased the ratchet. And then Cameron comes in with who was he with? I can't remember that funny little party he went into coalition with. But it got worse, didn't it? Actually, the Conservative Party outdid Labour, and over a period of 10 years, they really turbocharged the high tax and regulatory environment. And we see this as the start of a journey. That this is a very bold plan. We think it'll work. We think it will grow the economy. Actually, in the detailed note we've written that accompanies the PowerPoint, we look at a range of assumptions. We think 125 basis points is hugely achievable. That's less than Australia. But actually, we even at 75 basis points, this plan absolutely is self-funding. And once we've demonstrated this can work, we can start to look at further simplifications and start to get that balance between state and individual right. And actually, if our growth plan is right with the tax base is increased, you're a winner, I'm a winner, Richard's a winner, we're all winners, but actually so is someone working in the NHS or a teacher, because we'll have a better set of services.
Yeah.
What we've proven really is, I would challenge the other parties. Why is it that growth's getting worse year on year out? How can Rishi Sunak look at himself in the mirror and say 1.6% when the population's growing quite rapidly? So actually the per capita, the per head increase in wealth is even worse than that. How can they set such a low bar? But the reason is the more they complicate the economy, the more they direct spending to their pet projects, the worse it will get. They are killing the golden goose. So, I don't know, the Conservative Party have lost confidence in themselves. They've lost confidence in what I think was their historic mission to support the private individual to be as free as he conceivably could be within the confines of a civilized state. And this is why, I strongly back what Richard's doing here. And I think we've got a great opportunity to change the debate. Now, people are going to quibble at the margin. Have we set it right at 20,000 as the tax relet? Should we have changed it this way or that way? I get that. But we are going to try and change the debate from the typical debate you hear on the Today programme every day, you're not spending enough, to what about the private individual, and let's grow the cake.
Politicians can't avoid the temptation for what the Americans call pork barrel politics for their, their pet projects. I mean, Ian, just before we let you go, I mean, do you have a particular view as to, why the main parties, why they haven't had the courage to go down this route, particularly the Conservative Party?
It feels to me as if they have just succumbed to this trend of sort of left of centre big state consensus. Yeah. And COVID, if anything, has just exacerbated that. And I think they've got a habit-forming, big spending, big government mantra now.
That's right. I think that's right. What we call the nanny state, and they've got used to it. And
they have. Do you remember George Osborne, I'm sure, looked at flat rate taxation years and years ago and got squashed by the machine that is the Conservative Party. Yeah. So I couldn't agree more.
Well, look, Ian, thank you so much for that question, for you and for sharing that.
Thank you.
Thanks. I mean, it's this is extraordinary. Just where we've ended up. As Ewan said, we've ended up with this sort of big state, nanny state, and the other part of this plan is that we're going to simplify so many things. We're going to abolish stamp duty below £750,000. We're going to abolish VAT on domestic fuel. We're going to abolish stamp duty for share trading in the city to make that more competitive. Abolish air passenger duty. A raft of other things that we can get rid of, that we can afford that will make a real difference.
I think something you said earlier when you announced all of this was this is a historic moment, and actually it's a moment in time because interest rates are so low. Now is the time to do something. We've had a terrible sort of year and a half of COVID and everything. People are despondent and dejected, and I think this is about optimism. We're now free of the European Union. This is about Britain forging a new relationship on a global stage. Let's actually do something radical, give people hope. And build something really great.
That's right. I mean, people need hope, they need ambition. The Chancellor's proposals of 1.7%, there's no hope or ambition in that, unlike what we want to do. And we know that, in conclusion for this plan, the big headline number, 6 million people not paying income tax, over 1 million businesses not paying corporation tax. I mean, this is big, bold headline stuff. But we know, and this plan absolutely shows it, actually, we can afford it. And we will all benefit. It's a real win-win. Well, look, David, any last thought?
No, I just think it's such a significant moment. I just hope that, people can see the optimism that we're trying to bring with this bold plan. I think the other parties need to be frightened, actually, because I think, now they can see there really is a difference between what we're offering and what the other parties are offering.
Well, thank you. And this is a moment, it's a national moment where we have to have this debate. We have to be able to ensure that everybody in the country can look at this and look at the alternatives. And over the next 3 years, we're going to be pushing this message absolutely, central to everything about low tax, high growth, and that is the way that everybody can benefit. So that's the end of our TICE Talk special today. Thank you very much indeed for watching. I hope you found it of interest. My huge thanks to David Bull and also to Ewan Stewart and to the questioners who came forward, Sandra and Ian. And until next time, stay safe, enjoy yourselves, see you then.